can hear me. I'm Amit Chakma, President of Western. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this lecture. I'll be introducing our guest more formally. What a wonderful video. Not only a depiction of a great company, but also a quick history of the advancement that they've made in science, in technology that impacts our lives. All the way as I was watching the video, I could actually relate to some of those things. Many of you, particularly our students, you're too young to remember those punch cards, but that line was a good one. But the last line was equally powerful. Think, and that's what we do. Since it was established in whatever, 100 years back, 100 years in the history of mankind is really not a long time. But what that company has achieved is just truly remarkable. And I think key to the success of IBM, our friend will talk more about it, is really that focus on knowledge. Whether it's thinking, listening, learning, suddenly it has provided the company with the intellectual tools it required to change, to learn lessons about how to survive, not only survive but thrive, and get ahead of the curve in an age of remarkable technical and global change. And the lessons that have shaped a century of success of this great company, IBM, also provide important lessons for other institutions, in my view, certainly, and perhaps even for individuals. These insights are important for anyone already in leadership positions, and I would like to highlight leadership position, and you'll know why I'm highlighting that very quickly. But they're especially critical for the next generation of leaders. And again, highlighting leaders because we believe that we educate leaders of tomorrow at Western. So leaders and forward thinkers who wish to chart a path that is truly fitting for citizens of the world. I describe our future leaders as kind of global citizens. And we are in the business of educating those global citizens. With that in mind, I'm delighted to welcome today's keynote speaker, a Western engineering alumnus, and the president of IBM Canada, Mr. Bruce Ross. In his current role, Bruce is responsible for setting the strategic direction and overseeing the day-to-day operations of IBM organization in Canada. He is also a member of the IBM Integration and Values team, a group of senior leaders from across the corporation. Since joining IBM right out of Western in 1985, I think, Bruce, you're able to see your wonderful picture hanging somewhere. Bruce has held a variety of management, technical, and marketing positions. So again, for the benefit of our students, let me highlight a variety of management, technical, and marketing positions at IBM in Canada, the United States, and Europe. Before returning to Canada in early 2010, he served as general manager for IBM Global Technology Services in the United Kingdom, but also with responsibilities for Ireland and South Africa. Based in London from 2006 through 2009, Bruce led a significant expansion of the UK services business, including a doubling of the client base and double-digit growth in revenues. As Vice President of Global Technology Services, banking industry, Bruce built IBM's strategic outsourcing business with leading financial institutions in North America. Outside of IBM, Bruce has played many volunteer leadership roles, and he currently serves on the boards of the Conference Board of Canada and the Toronto Region Research Alliance. He's also the technology chair of the United Way Toronto Campaign Cabinet and a member of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives. More importantly to Western, perhaps, is the common bond and a strong bond that we have between Western and IBM. Many of you have seen this wonderful picture. If you haven't seen it, it's worth picking it up. It is available in this wonderful copy of our alumni cassette. You can pick it up almost on many kiosks, if I can describe it that way, across our campus. And what you see is a portrait of the three IBM presidents of the Western Connection. So I was happy to brag about three IBM presidents who happened to be Western graduates, but Bruce just reminded me there was a fourth one who is unfortunately deceased, and that's why it's not part of the picture. So I can just tell you a whole lot of story about what I do with this wonderful picture. But let me just tell you what. We are working on an important project with IBM and the University of Toronto. And the president of Toronto has the habit of bragging about almost everything. And he's a good friend. So, I allow him to brag about everything. But occasionally I brag about few things. And these are such powerful things that it gets to him. So one is that you will be familiar, the quality of students that we attract to Western. And those of you who are not part of the Western family, you would not know this. On that count, in terms of entrance average, we beat Toronto hands down. So we are at 88%, second highest in the province of Ontario. So suddenly my friend David Naylor gets it. So the second item that I kind of bargain with is really when we talk about that IBM project, we have to talk to each other. I just bring this up. You know this, and he gets it. So with that, just those of you who are not familiar, what we have is three presidents. Here, Bill Etherington, former president of IBM, a great friend of the university and a graduate of this faculty. John Thompson, our current chancellor, again a graduate of this faculty as well as our business school, and of course our guest today. So Bruce, with that, I think this is your home. So welcome home and feel at home.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So good morning. I'm always humbled to see that video, and because it means so much in just 12 short minutes of innovation and progression over a course of 100 years. But first of all, I'd like to thank President Chankra and Dean Ernie Rymack for having me here, and all of you for participating today. It is a great homecoming for me. I graduated in 1985. I was in the chairs that many of you are in today, listening to lectures, preparing for exams, doing the odd sporting activity, and maybe too much of that sometimes, and staying out late and really enjoying the university experience. I loved Western. Purple and white. I had a sister that went to Queen's. My dad went to RMC, and my mother went to Queen's as well. And I was determined that I was going to go to a different school, and this was absolutely the right place for me. I was in Sydenham Hall at the time. Sydenham Hall was men's residence back in 1981, and the sport I really enjoyed was rowing. So I spent a lot of time at Fanshawe Lake, if any of you do there, on the reservoir very early morning. I used to ride from Limberlost. I lived in Limberlost, if that still exists. The 10-kilometer ride, no brakes on my bicycle. And so that was a pretty rough ride. Occasionally, as you tried to slipstream a bus or something else, I wouldn't advise that. That wasn't an engineering tactic. But anyways, I'm absolutely extraordinarily pleased to be here to talk about our 100th anniversary as a company. And as your president said, I follow in a long line of leaders, and I'm very mindful of that, that have already made their way. Jack Brent, who led IBM in the 1960s, was a graduate of the Western Engineering School. John Thompson in the 80s, Bill Etherington in the 90s, and I started in this position in 2010. And 26 years in a single company, you sit there and say, well, how could you possibly be in a single company for 26 years? I've got to tell you, when I started at IBM, everything to me was in fours, or five years of high school at the time. We did have grade 13, that's why, right? 5 years of high school, 4 years of university. You think, okay, 4 years of work, and I'll continue on to other things. But there's been a couple of things that engineering taught me. One was a curiosity, a deep curiosity for how things work and how they could work better. And two was solving problems. And in both of those attributes, I've had the opportunity while at IBM to really explore those things. So it's been in everything I do. Curiosity to understand, to learn, whether it's going to different places in different countries or whether it's solving problems. Now, I've brought my family. I was going to say I've dragged my family around that. They may say that if you talk to them. You know, I left Canada in 1997 single. And but my girlfriend at the time was living in Toronto, so I quickly realized that I either get married now or this could all end in tears. So we got married. So we have Canadian parents, American children, and an English dog, as I tell people, that we brought back from the UK. So we're absolutely ecstatic to be here. Now, in coming to spend time with you today, I didn't want to make this a history lesson, and I certainly didn't want to make it a commercial for IBM. That's not who we are. That's not how we graduated. But I thought what I could do today is to share a couple of lessons that I've learned through 26 years in this company, lessons that I think may be appropriate for you to think about as you progress in your own careers. Not just lessons of a company, but lessons of an individual. And I thought that I would talk about those. And those three lessons are really stay focused on creativity and avoiding commoditization at all costs. That's the first one. The second one is having the fortitude to make big bets and to make those bets based on what you believe and be committed to them. And third is think about culture. Think about culture as a competitive tactic. Some might say weapon, right? But as a competitive tactic. And those three areas are things that, as I've looked at my own career and I've looked at how our business has progressed, have been things that have come forward. And I thought deeply about that. You know, you start to put 26 years in context, but those three things of commoditization and avoiding that, big bets, and creating a culture that is appropriate for what you need to achieve are three things that I'll focus on today. So when you think about IBM, you know, we started in 1911, and back then we were making food processing equipment like meat slicers and cheese cutters, you know, but not the furthest things away from computers that you could possibly think of. And then, of course, we started to invent, and you saw in the video in 1962, we invented the Sabre reservation system. In 1961, it was the selectric typewriter. Fortran, the computing language that I certainly used when I started at Western, and you may or may not use today. And then, of course, a lot of deep science that has permeated our company. But the progression of technology and the innovation has been always something that we've done, and that's all around that area of commoditization. In fact, Thomas Watson Jr., Thomas Watson Sr. founded IBM. His son, Thomas Watson Jr., took over the company in 1960. At that time, when he took over the company, Watson Jr. said that no product should be expected to serve its clients for more than a decade. And you should never expect that whatever you make is going to last in perpetuity. Now, the paperclip still exists, but many, many things in our society and many, many things, especially in the industry in which you are training for or working in, will not last for more than that period of time. In fact, Watson Jr. at that time, he gave a lecture similar to the one that we're talking about here today back in 1961. And he said that only of the top 25 industrial corporations in the United States in 1900, only 2 of them existed in 1961. So only 2. And he said that figures like those remind us that success is fleeting and corporations are expendable. And at the best case, success is an achievement which can always slip out of our hands. And so having a healthy paranoia. And he said that back in 1961. And then, of course, here we are 50 years later in 2011. And of the Fortune 50 companies that existed back in 1961, only 6 exist today. So what he said was absolutely true. And so that deep focus on innovation is absolutely core and central to everything we do. So let's go on to this first discussion point, this whole point about avoiding commoditization. You know, we forgot that lesson in 1981. Now, you saw that PC, very luggable as it was. Right? You needed a weight lift in order to be able to support that system. But we were last into the PC business. In fact, we sold DOS. Right? We had it, we sold it. We were a huge investor in Intel. We didn't see it coming. But then we got into the business. We did extraordinarily well in that business. But we also were willing to get out of that business. You know, some of you'll hear in the stock market, some people tell you it's not your ability to buy a share, it's your ability to sell a share. You know, how many of you actually have sold shares? A few. How many of you bought shares? More, right? So a lot to do with that. So it's really the fact that you've got to be willing to get out of commoditized businesses. How many people here know what the word DRAM is? Okay, a few. The people at the front all know. Right? Dynamic random access memory. But memory that really was the heartbeat of computers, is the heartbeat of a lot of computers. We developed dynamic random access memory. Some of our scientists were very wed to that capability, and yet we decided that it was a commoditized business and we got out of it. We then got out of the PC business. We got out of the PC business, it was making up $10 billion worth of IBM's revenue, and we got out of that business in the early 90s. You can think of some companies today that are thinking of getting out of the PC business because it's really impossible to make any money. So it's not just about understanding that a business is becoming commoditized, it's about the ability to understand when you really need to get out of it. We got out of the hard drive business. We sold that business again off in the 90s. And just to give you a context of that, IBM is a $100 billion company. When you sell off 10% of your business, or about $10 billion worth of your revenue, it reverberates through the financial markets. Right? And at that time, when we sold it, the markets were really looking for companies like IBM to grow its revenue, not to shrink its revenue. So this was a very difficult decision that we had to make at that point in time. But you've really got to understand what your business model is. And when you look at IBM today and IBM Canada, this is something that I really look at. I really look at our ability to be competitive on a global scale inside Canada. And when you look at some of the statistics on the wall behind me here, and you look at the business, we're a very sophisticated business. We're not just a sales arm of a big US corporation. We're a multifaceted organization that does a tremendous amount of research and development in the country. We spend about $600 million a year. We avoid commoditization by making sure that we understand where the market is going and we align our research to where it's going. If your research or your development is focused on where the market is today or where it was, that's a recipe for not being in business in the future. Our Bromont plant, that's what the top right is. We export $1.8 billion worth of chips every year. And those chips are things not just that go into the servers that IBM makes and in all of our entire product line, but they're also the heart and soul of the Xbox 360, the Sony PlayStation, and other devices in the gaming industry. So we've very diversified that. In fact, in chip manufacturing today, there are really only two real chip manufacturers. That is Intel and IBM. And it's because this business has become so commoditized over time. But you have to have tremendous scale. This plant that we have in Bromont is absolutely fixated on making sure that it's competitive. So how many of you are in engineering? Okay, lean manufacturing. This is the home of lean manufacturing for IBM. This team that runs our Bromont plant is continually ripping apart the processes and the business model for how they execute and rebuilding themselves so that they can stay competitive. By all accounts, you'd say, why would you have a plant in Canada when the labor rates are high, the engineering is obviously being done in other places around the world, and it's such a highly competitive marketplace? It's because the team is highly skilled, highly focused through lean and other manufacturing techniques, and they continue to reinvent themselves. Now we're also into research and software development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the two pieces on the bottom as we go forward here. But we have 6 labs, software labs across the country that are very focused on the leading edge of what we believe the future is going to be. And that really takes me to what I would call big bets. Right? So the first is commoditization, avoiding commoditization, staying at the leading edge of where things are going, not where they're coming from. And the second area is having a willingness to make a big bet. And having a willingness to, what we say, putting it all on the line. Whether it's betting your career, whether it's betting the company, and those things clearly happened. One of the vignettes that you would have seen in that video was IBM introduced the System 360 computer back in the early 60s. There were really three areas of computing, and you'll hear them from different people, and you'll hear them in different ways. But if you look at, as your president was saying, in the first generation was basically manual. It was tabulating machines, punch cards, where you actually had a spinning drum that a card went over and a claw came on and the claw went through the hole and created an electric current, and then that determined whether, whether something was counted or not counted. And it was that simple but that sophisticated at the time. The second generation was all about programmable computers. And in the early 60s, IBM bet on the programmable computer and invented it. And in fact, imagine this. Back in 1960, spending $4 billion on the invention of this technology. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is we shut down 4 out of 5 business lines of the company. So we literally stopped 4 out of the 5 key business areas of the company and bet the whole company on the System 360 computer. That was a massive bet for us. If we had failed, we would not have existed in the 70s, let alone in 2011. But we saw this coming and we realized that this was something that we needed to do. The second big bet that we made was later. This was back in the 90s, in the late 90s, and we bought PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting. And we found at that time that our clients were really looking for not just technology and technology solutions, they were looking for how to solve business problems. And it was really the focus on what's the business problem and then how do I address the business problem. And to be honest with you, at that time, we were so focused on the engineering and moving the engineering up, we weren't thinking of the business problem down. And with a company as large as ours, we didn't think that we could actually train our staff quickly enough, but that we would actually have to go out and acquire that talent. And we bought PricewaterhouseCoopers. It brought 30,000 consultants into IBM. And these were consultants that were really focused on business. You have to realize the risk there. When you buy a firm that has consultants, it's not like a product or a technology that stays with you. It has the ability to walk, right? So you have to actually find a way for that set of capability to want to stay in your business. And we literally had to change the culture of our business when we bought PricewaterhouseCoopers. And today, as I look at our business, we've had to make some big bets here in Canada. And so those numbers at the bottom, while they look like big numbers, $275 million in investments in Canada, that's investing in microelectronics, that's investing in our labs. And what will become very apparent in a few minutes is what labs we're investing in, because we've been very targeted on what labs we invest in. We don't just invest for a lab to have science, we invest in science because it's going to solve a business problem. And that's 75 products that we developed across these 6 locations we'll talk about in a second. But big bets are not just made at a level of a corporation. They're not just made at the level of a geography, but they're made at an individual level. In fact, I would argue that you've made big bets in your careers by coming to Western, by taking the courses that you're taking, whether it's engineering, whether it's business, and those are part of you. They're who you are, and that curiosity or problem solving, as I like to say, those 2 key attributes are the things that will potentially drive you. So if you look then at our company as we've evolved and the big bets we're making today, we really have 4 key strategic themes. And as I talk about these strategic themes, think back to that video where we were making punch cards, we were making, inventing the Sabre system. Think of the UPC barcode that we invented with Procter & Gamble. But think back in history and how things have evolved, and we've made, think of all those hardware technologies we were putting out the door. And now as I tell you these 4 strategic themes, you could perhaps relate them to them. So first, our first key strategy, you've heard Smarter Planet. Smarter Planet is about the ability to take business processes that exist today and make them smarter. through the leverage of technology. I think the Sabre system is actually a great example of that, where if you tried to get an airline reservation back in the early 60s, it would have looked very much like if you go into an old-fashioned diner today where the waitress or waiter is putting the order form on a lazy Susan that sits back at the kitchen. And how could you possibly process the number of passengers that an airline does today? As much as you may not have the experience you like in there, can you imagine what it would be like if that were the kind of system? So that's one. Second area is business analytics. Big analytics. Today, almost everything that we have is highly instrumented. Whether that's your cell phone, whether that's a bridge that you've designed, there's a lot of instrumentation there. And the ability to take that instrumentation, the data that comes from that instrumentation, whether it's in healthcare, energy, etc., and turn that data into information, and then to take that information and create intelligence out of it, that's all what analytics is all about. Cloud computing. Everybody's talking about cloud computing, but this is the ability to access computing power as much as you want, not dissimilar to how you plug an appliance into a wall today. And the ability to use that capability to solve the types of problems you're solving. And then lastly, for us, it's emerging markets. So you would have heard I had responsibility for South Africa at one point in time. South Africa is a very different marketplace than the major markets like the UK, like Canada, like the United States. They don't have the infrastructure that we have. They don't have what we call the bow wave of depreciation, the investments that they made 50 years ago, like fixed line telephony, that they then have to overcome. They don't have those things. So that's an opportunity for them. Yet at the same time, they don't have the schools and the capability and the education that you have and I have that can allow us to compete as well. So we took these businesses and we separated them. Have I got a... I've got more wires connected to me, you guys, than possibly ever. Like I've got two of these things on at the same time, plus the clicker. So I'm sorry about that. But this whole ability, in the emerging markets to invest what you need to invest is key core for us. So let's go back to data, and I'd like to talk to you, show you a really brief video that talks about data and how we use it. So we'll go to the video, please.
With the ability to generate vast amounts of data, it's becoming even more important to be able to look at data and to extract insight from the data.
And the more disparate types of data that you can connect, the more valuable the insights that you can actually develop. The easier it is to make real-time decisions in the world that will improve outcomes in traffic, outcomes in healthcare, outcomes in utility usage.
This data, though it might be very hard to understand and there might be a lot of confusion, but taking a step back, you can mine and find amazing things in that data set that can make your company work much, much smarter and have understandings and insights that you would not have had before.
When you look at the way that we treat diseases like cancer, right now it's a very empirical science. We treat with drugs and see what works for people. And the more insight we get into the actual biology, by looking at the data, looking at the genetic sequences, the more we realize that what we call one disease is actually 20 diseases. And the more we can identify that, the more we can pinpoint therapies, even design therapies. So I think that this notion of being able to use new insights gleaned from data is going to absolutely fundamentally change just about everything we do.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the future could possibly be like with analytics, with Smarter Planet, with data, completely changing business models that any of us would have looked at before. And that's what we mean by big bets. And that's what we mean by really betting your career, betting your company. At different points in time, you make those types of choices. But you have to have the fortitude to stay with it when others may say no, and have a real deep belief that you're going to be successful in what you do. And isn't that true in what we do in everyday life? And so that really takes me to the third piece, which I talked about culture. Culture is a competitive tactic. And when I think about culture, I think about it in the business context, right? The business context. And how do you think of culture in the business context? We look at culture as a set of behaviors. I like to say it's a set of behaviors that you and I exhibit when no one else is watching. How do we act? How do we react? How do we execute? What do we think about? How do we behave? And how do we behave as an organization, and how do we behave as a set of people? And really, if you actually think about it, you really could think of culture evolving in businesses in really sort of three key areas. One is a culture of systems thinking. And I'll come back to these, but systems thinking, thinking of a system as a group of systems. Second is the culture of analytics. And third is the culture of working for a higher purpose. Because when you think of those things, I think the three of them coming together, they can create take a good company and turn it into a great company. Now let's talk about that system of systems. So probably the best way to describe it is to give you a few examples. When you think of 9/11, you think of oil spills like the Exxon Valdez, and you think of the ramifications that happened all around those incidents. Or you think of that more recently, the volcano in Iceland that really crippled most of Europe. I happened to be caught in Ireland, and I spent 7 days in Ireland as a result of that. It was a nice time. I had taken the job in Canada, and I was going back and forth finishing off some business, but I was literally stranded in Ireland. And what you saw as you sat there and as you worked through that whole thing is that we live in a system of systems. Things that happen environmentally can affect business activity in a way that no one would have ever thought of. During that volcano in Iceland, it was actually stranding food at Heathrow Airport, fresh food and fish, etc., that all went bad. There was no way of routing it around it. The systems hadn't been created that said, if I've got a weather issue in a specific part of the world, how do I route the planes in a different direction so that I don't end up getting stranded with all of this rotting food? There was also no process of being able to take the food when it was stuck in Heathrow Airport and saying, okay, this fresh fish is never going to land in the restaurants of New York, so why don't I divert it to a food shelter or to somebody that's in real need here in London or in the outskirts of London? So a system of systems and how we think about systems today is actually going to have to change. And that culture inside of an organization of being able to think of a set of systems in that way is what I believe is going to differentiate people going forward and differentiate businesses. The second area is this whole area of a culture of analytics. And when I think of a culture of analytics, there's probably no better example of that than Jeopardy and the Watson computer. Now, how many of you saw Jeopardy? Okay, so why don't I show the clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about the culture of analytics. So we'll turn that on now.
At the very beginning, there was a version of a system that would take questions and come back with answers, and it was terrible.
This trusted friend was the first non-dairy powdered creamer. Watson?
What is milk?
No! That wasn't wrong. That was really wrong, Watson.
Our initial systems didn't have the notion of what's the answer type. Like, what's the question you can ask me for? Watson takes a question, parses it, tries to understand it, comes up with a bunch of guesses what the answer might be, and then uses all of these algorithms to score the answers and figure out, of all these answers I have, what's the best answer?
For computers like Watson, they don't really know what anything means. What we can try to explain to them is what words are associated with other words. So if you say McCain ran for office and some runner ran a race, you can try to represent to the machine that there are two meanings for the word run. And so you're associating words with other words, and then you can associate those with other words.
get a lot smarter about how we use the different evidence. We're using smarter techniques in terms of looking at what have we seen before. Have we seen other things in this category that help us understand what to do with this question?
Beekeeping for 1,000.
If you're pondering your puppet, you're staring at this body part. Watson.
What is belly button?
Here's your bee. Good job. Welcome back to the plus side, Watson.
I have to say that Watson actually surprises me every time it plays. Even at this point, it's doing better than I ever thought that we would be able to get to.
Reality shows over Shakespeare for 200.
Heroes and villains abound. Colby, Coach, and Rupert don't return to the fray, but Boston Rob, the tribe, hath spoken. Watson.
What is survival?
Really? How do you know that? Good job, Watson.
What we've done with the underlying technology has the potential to advance science in ways we didn't imagine. Are we going to have the Star Trek computer next year? No. But are we doing things that we imagined couldn't be done before? Yes, I think we are.
So when I talked earlier about the punch card to the programmable computer, perhaps the next year is really what Watson delivers. And when you think about that, massive capability in terms of natural language, deep analytics, the ability to do statistical analysis and sift out right from wrong in massive amounts of data, and then to be able to respond at lightning speed. The one thing that always amazes me about Watson, because it's a great example of not just the culture of analytics, but also big bets. 8 months before the Jeopardy show, the response time of Watson was about 8 minutes. And at that time, our chairman had to sign the contract with Sony Entertainment to actually get on the show. You don't decide you're going to be on Jeopardy one day and then you're on there the next day. So eight months before we had to sign the contract, our chairman phoned our head of research and said, "Should I sign this contract? Because we're doing pretty well in the industry, and if I sign this contract and we blow this thing, then our reputation is at risk." Can you imagine? And our head of research said, "Boss, go ahead and sign the contract." And that was when our response time was 8 minutes. And so they went from 8 minutes to sub-second, as you would have seen through that process. But that ability, to look forward and make those big bets, sometimes you do those types of things. And it's really not about man versus machine, is it? It's about the ability to leverage technology and capability to make the world a better place, to address this system of systems and the deep complexities that are required. The thing about Jeopardy is that it is a very complex set of questions. It's understanding the English language. It's being able to decipher riddles and puns and turn them into what is the question really asking me, and then trying to find out what the answer is. So it's not just about search. It's about that relationship between what I'm being asked for and what I'm trying to solve. Those are really important things. But to take it to where we are today, places like the Edmonton Police Force are using deep analytics to determine where to place their assets, their police officers, their cars, based on specific times a year when crime or a specific type of crime may happen to occur. So for them, it's things like arson. They can tell when arson potentially could happen in a specific part of the city and then overweight their assets in that area. New York City is using that as well. How would New York City has become a very safe city. When you think of New York today, you think of a completely different city than you would have 20 years ago, or your parents may have thought of as they went there. And we're now using analytics within the Canadian environment to look at things like the cognitive car. Where a car would, and we're working with universities, yourself, you're Western, you're involved in this along with McMaster, IBM, General Motors, all getting together to look at how does a car actually sense and respond to specific events. So today if your car backs up, you could see that it actually starts to beep when you go to the wall. Well, what if it actually stopped? Or what if you're actually about to hit somebody, it actually moved out of the way? That'd be all right as long as it doesn't hit anybody else. You're fine. But those are the types of things that analytics is capable of. Watson today is past second year at medical school at Columbia with 100% average. Trust me, you don't want to be in the same class as Watson. But what does it say? Is it says the future of healthcare, the future of financial services are all great pieces. a capability. So let's then talk about the third area of culture. So we talked about the culture of systems thinking. We talked about the culture of analytics. And now let's really talking about the culture of working for a higher purpose. Because this has been a deep-founded expertise. And I said earlier that culture can be the difference between a good company and a great company. Because what are the problems that we're all really trying to solve? In the end, we're really trying to make life a better experience for all of those of us on the planet. And we're trying to make it either easier to get food to those of us that need it, to give health care to those of us that need it and are absolutely less fortunate than ourselves, and to be able to live a more fulfilling life. Inside IBM and inside other great corporations are very focused on what is it that is going to make life more meaningful for those of us that work there. One of the things that we do in IBM, we created a group we call the Corporate Services Corps. And this is a group of people that we send into emerging markets, so other markets where people are not as fortunate as we are, to help solve big problems that they have. We've sent over 75 people from IBM Canada into these markets in the last year, and they spend a month inside the geography helping to figure out, for instance, in Vietnam, how to do food traceability, because it's very important to understand one of their biggest exports is food, how to figure out how to make sure that the food quality that's either being exported or being moved around inside the country is safe. We're sending people to places like India to work with hospitals on figuring out the types of systems that are going to be required in order to manage patients and patient care. But it's all about a higher purpose. And this is one of the things at IBM that while we send 75 people a year, we get more people volunteering and wanting to go on this type of activity than almost anything else. Because the culture inside the business is something that creates that culture of a higher purpose. And whether it was the policy letter number 4 that you briefly saw up there back in the 1950s, IBM was opening plants in the southern states, but the governors of the southern states weren't allowing us to hire, they were discriminating based on race. And so we created policy letter number 4, which said we wouldn't discriminate based on what race, color, or creed. And then we went one step further. We put the policy letter in the newspaper to say to the governors of those states, it says, if you won't let us execute the way we need to execute, then we won't open up a plant in these southern states. And that was 10 years, as they said, before the civil rights movement. What we've done today is in 2005, we put in place a policy that said we wouldn't discriminate based on what we could glean from your genetic makeup. Now, back in 2005, I looked at that and I laughed. I said, what are we talking about? But we had taken this computer that we used to play chess against Garry Kasparov, and we then created a computer called Blue Gene, which helped isolate the human genome. And isolating the human genome is important because then you can start to look at things like personalized medicine. But you can also tell potentially what may happen, the types of things that any one of us could need to live with. And so what we did is we put this policy letter together and said we wouldn't discriminate based on that. Today it makes sense. Back then it was hard to see. So as I conclude then, it's really about those 3 things. It's about avoiding commoditization and be willing to sacrifice some things that may be very near and dear to your heart as you then avoid that commoditization. 2, it's making big bets. And big bets not just at a corporate level, but taking ownership of those at a very personal level. And those are things that you must really believe in and you have conviction in. And then of course the third area is creating that culture and using culture as a competitive tactic in what you do. I wouldn't have been at IBM over 26 years if it weren't for the fact that I've had so much ability to leverage those 2 key elements of curiosity and problem solving that I learned here at Western. And also to be able to work on problems that really meant something to the world and to what we do every day. And I couldn't tell you that my career would have ended up going in all the directions that it has, and I wouldn't tell anybody that it's necessarily the right career path to go on. But what I can tell you is that if you follow your heart and you follow the principles that are so dear to you, you will get where you want. And inside IBM, we have really 3 fundamental values: dedication to every client's success, trust and personal responsibility in all relationships, and then innovation that matters for our company and for the planet. We're willing to change everything in our company except those 3 values. And whenever we get into a certain situation that looks tough or we don't know what to do, we go back to this value system and we say, is what action we're about to take fitting within those values? So these learnings that I just talked about over 26 years at IBM are really a product not of just what I've learned at the company, but the foundation that I took from here. So with that, I'll wrap up, and I'd be happy to take any questions, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.